They say neighbors are supposed to look out for one another. And honestly, that's what I thought too until my HOA taught me the exact opposite. It was one of those days in Arizona where the sun feels like it's trying to burn through your skin. The kind of heat where the air itself shimmers and even standing outside for a few minutes feels dangerous. I was watching delivery drivers, mail carriers, and even some of my elderly neighbors struggle just to walk down the street without looking like they were about to collapse. So I decided to do something simple, something human. I grabbed a cooler, filled it with ice, and stocked it full of bottled water. Then I set it out near the sidewalk with a little sign that said, "Stay cool, take one, free water." I thought nothing of it. In fact, it felt good. A few people smiled, waved, and gratefully grabbed a bottle. The UPS guy actually stopped to shake my hand and told me it made his day. It cost me maybe $15 at the grocery store, but it felt worth it knowing I was helping people in a small way. But apparently, kindness isn't allowed in my neighborhood. Because a few days later, I came home to a letter taped on my door with that all too familiar HOA logo stamped at the top. My stomach dropped even before I opened it. And sure enough, inside was a notice that read, "You are in violation of community policy. Unauthorized distribution of goods is considered solicitation. Remove cooler immediately. Fine, $100. At first I laughed. I thought it had to be a mistake. Who in their right mind would fine someone for giving out water during a heat wave? So I called the HOA office and asked if they'd sent it by accident. The woman on the other end didn't even hesitate. She said, "No mistake. If you want to hand things out, you need board approval. Otherwise, it's advertising, and advertising is banned." Advertising? I wasn't selling anything. I wasn't handing out flyers. I wasn't asking for donations. I was literally giving away water for free to people who needed it. I tried to explain that to her, but she just repeated the same line in a robotic tone. Unauthorized distribution is against policy. And then she hung up on me. I thought maybe the whole thing would blow over if I ignored it, so I left the cooler out. And sure enough, the next week, another fine arrived. Another $100. Then the next week, another $100. It became a routine. Every week I gave out water. Every week they fined me for it. Before I knew it, the total had stacked up to $500 in fines. And that's when I realized the HOA wasn't going to stop. They weren't just sending notices to make a point. They wanted to break me. But instead of backing down, I decided to fight back. And little did the HOA know their petty $100 fines were about to cost them everything. When you live under an HOA, you learn to pick your battles. But this wasn't just about a cooler of water anymore. To me, it had become a test of something bigger: common sense, compassion, and basic humanity. By the time the fines stacked up to $500, my wife started asking me whether it was worth it. She reminded me that every dollar we gave to the HOA was money we'd never see again, and she wasn't wrong. But I couldn't let it go. How could anyone in power look at neighbors struggling in 110-degree heat and decide that bottled water was a crime? It wasn't just absurd, it was cruel, so I decided to push back. The next HOA board meeting was coming up, and for the first time in years, I went. I walked into that sterile clubhouse where they hold the meetings with its buzzing fluorescent lights and folding chairs lined up in neat rows. The board sat at the front like a tribunal, 5 people staring down at us like we were children asking for permission to speak. At the center was the president, a woman named Marjorie. She was the kind of person who wore her title like armor chin high, lips pursed, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and explained what I'd been doing. I told them about the mailman who thanked me, the elderly neighbor who smiled with relief, the kids who stopped by after playing in the park. I said, "It's just water. I'm not making a profit. I'm trying to keep people safe." For a moment, I thought I saw one of the board members soften, but Marjorie? She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into her microphone and said, "Rules are rules. If we allow you to put out a cooler, then next week someone else will put out a cooler with soda, then someone else with candy, and before you know it, we'll have an unregulated mess in our neighborhood." A few people in the audience actually nodded, but others people I knew shifted uncomfortably. One older man even raised his hand and said, "It's water, in Arizona, during a heat wave. Isn't that different? Marjorie shut him down instantly. We can't make exceptions. Exceptions create problems. The fines will stand. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules at all. It was about control. And Marjorie loved control. When I got home that night, I was fired up. If they wanted to keep fining me, fine. But I wasn't going to stop giving out water. I moved the cooler into my driveway, right by the edge where people walked past. I even painted a big smiley face on the sign just to make it clear this wasn't going away. 2 days later, the HOA struck back harder. I came home from work to find the cooler gone. Just gone. At first, I thought someone had stolen it. But then I noticed another envelope taped to my door. Inside was a new violation notice that read, "Unauthorized items left in common view have been confiscated by the HOA. If you wish to retrieve your property, please pay your outstanding fines in full." They hadn't just fined me. They had literally stolen my cooler. That was the moment things shifted from absurd to personal. Because now, the HOA wasn't just punishing me, they were trying to humiliate me. So I did what anyone would do in 2025. I took it online. I snapped a photo of the letter and posted it on a neighborhood forum. The caption read, "HOA fined me $500 and stole my cooler for giving away water during a heat wave." I expected a handful of neighbors to commiserate. Instead, the post blew up. People were furious. Some shared their own horror stories with Marjorie and the board. Others offered to chip in for another cooler. And a few even suggested calling the local news. That gave me an idea. The next morning, I bought another cooler. This time, I didn't just fill it with water, I set up a camera right above it. If the HOA wanted to steal it again, they'd be caught red-handed. Sure enough, it didn't take long. That very afternoon, I got the alert on my phone. The footage showed none other than Marjorie herself walking up my driveway, glancing around and dragging the cooler away with both hands. I couldn't believe it. The HOA president trespassing on my property, stealing from me in broad daylight. I watched the clip over and over, and each time it felt more outrageous. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was on a power trip, and she thought no one could stop her. But now I had proof. And what I decided to do with that proof, well, that was going to change everything. The moment I had that video of Marjorie dragging away my cooler, I knew I wasn't just holding evidence, I was holding a weapon. For days, the HOA had acted like I was the problem, like I was some unruly child who needed to be punished for not obeying their rules. But here was their president, breaking the very rules she preached, caught trespassing on private property and stealing my belongings. I thought about marching straight down to the HOA office and slamming the video down on the table, but then I paused. Marjorie had power on her side, and I'd already seen how quickly she shut people down when they challenged her in meetings. If I went in guns blazing, she'd probably twist the story and make me out to be the villain. No, this needed a bigger audience. So I uploaded the video to the same neighborhood forum where I'd posted the letter. This time I didn't even add a caption. I just let the video speak for itself. Within hours, the post had exploded. Neighbors who'd once sat silently at board meetings were suddenly furious, calling for Marjorie to resign. Some demanded the HOA return my cooler immediately, while others pointed out that what she did wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. And then the local news caught wind of it. I'll never forget the phone call. A reporter from Channel 8 asked if I'd be willing to do an interview about the HOA president stealing water from residents. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't trying to be on TV, I just wanted to give people water. But when I thought about all those fines, all those letters, and the smug way Marjorie had shut me down, I said yes. That week, the story aired during the evening news. The segment showed the blazing Arizona sun, the cooler full of water bottles, and then, clear as day, Marjorie dragging it away like she was confiscating contraband. The anchor's voiceover made it sound even worse. In the middle of a dangerous heat wave, one man's attempt to provide water to neighbors has turned into a battle with his HOA and the HOA president. She was caught on camera removing his supplies without permission. The fallout was immediate. My phone lit up with texts from neighbors, coworkers, even family out of state who'd seen the clip. Everyone had the same reaction: outrage. The next HOA meeting was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Usually those rooms were half empty, with maybe a dozen residents scattered in the chairs. This time it was packed wall to wall. People were standing in the back, clutching printed screenshots of the video. Marjorie tried to act like nothing had happened. She opened the meeting with her usual stiff tone, announcing agenda items in that voice that made every sentence sound like a punishment. But before she could even finish, one of the residents shouted, "What about the cooler?" The room erupted. Voices overlapped, people shouting questions, demanding answers. Marjorie tried to quiet everyone, tapping her microphone and insisting, "Order! Order!" But the crowd wasn't having it. Finally, one man stood up, holding his phone with the video paused on the screen. He turned it toward her and said, "Is this you, Marjorie?" The silence that followed was deafening. Her face went pale. She tried to brush it off, saying she had authorization to remove unauthorized objects. But that only made people angrier. One woman yelled back, "On his driveway? That's not community property. That's theft." By the end of the meeting, it was clear Marjorie had lost her grip. A motion was brought forward to remove her as president, and the room practically shook with applause. But here's the best part. Not only did Marjorie step down within the month, but the HOA had no choice but to wipe my fines clean. They even sent me a written apology, though it was clearly drafted by their lawyer and not from the heart. Still, it felt like victory, and as for the cooler, I got it back. I put it right back in the driveway the next day, filled with ice and bottled water, this time with a brand new sign taped to the front. It read, "Free water, courtesy of your neighbor, approved by the people." That summer, I lost a few $100s in fines, a couple of coolers, and more patience than I thought I had. But in the end, I gained something bigger, the knowledge that when you stand up to bullies, especially the ones hiding behind rules and titles, you can actually win. And the best part? On those scorching afternoons, when I see someone grab a cold bottle of water and smile, I know it was worth every second of the fight. Because kindness should never need permission.